Good morning, class. Welcome to WASA once again. This is PLARHG History and Geography. Once again, my name is Jonathan, and I am your teacher for this course. Just some housekeeping items to get started with. I want to apologize for this Tuesday. Since I was away for my community visit in Sandy Lake, I had to cancel class and reschedule class. So this is week 3, class 1 for this week. Just an announcement that I'm going to make up Tuesday class tomorrow. So it'll be class tomorrow. Okay, so we're gonna have week 3 lesson class 2. We're gonna have it tomorrow at 9 a.m. Central Time. Okay, so this will be our makeup class that we missed on Tuesday. Okay, so please come to your learning center tomorrow if you're able to. Highly encourage you to bring your classmates and everyone else to come do a live session. That way we can have students in my class participate in asking questions. If it doesn't make sense, you can ask questions live. I didn't want to do recording lessons because you guys couldn't ask questions, and I couldn't switch a time slot Tuesday evening with another teacher. So I'm going to make up Tuesday class tomorrow. Okay, so we do have PLARHG History Geography tomorrow. Please spread that word out. Again, I'll post a little reminder on my Facebook page, but we have class tomorrow. So makeup class for Tuesday that we miss will be week 3, class 2 tomorrow at 9 a.m. Central Time, same time. Okay, and after that, we'll be back on our normal schedule. Okay, are there any questions, any confusions? Please let me know. Okay, so this is week 3, class 1 for today on Thursday. So today we are going to do a bit of review. We're going to look at what we talked about last week about Canada and its involvement in the Second World War. And we're also going to do a quick review on Canada's treatment on Japanese-Canadian. And then we're going to start in a new section on after the war. We'll look about what Canada was like after the war, after the Second World War. We'll look at the Bills of Rights and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. We are progressing really well throughout the course. My goal is to finish lesson 2 by tomorrow. That way, all the assignments for lesson 2 will be can be completed over the weekend and such. And then next week, week 4, my goal is to finish the history section. That's my goal. That's my intent. So we'll finish off lesson 3 next week. And then after that, we'll look at geography. But again, if there's any questions, if there's anything you want me to go over, for example, if you want me to go over women's history, women's prohibition, the temperance movement, or you want me to go way back during week 1 to review what was Canada like during the early 1900s, please let me know. We do have the time. We are progressing nicely, which is great. But again, I also do have that flexibility and time to always go back and review and go over materials that doesn't make sense that you want me to go over as well. I'm also getting lots of assignments coming in, which is fantastic. So thank you so much for submitting your assignments. Please continue to submit your assignments whenever you get the chance. That way I can mark it and give you feedback. Some students are taking the initiative to redo their assignments, which is great. So that can always improve your mark. Okay, so just because you submit one assignment and you didn't do so well, it's not the end of the world. You can always resubmit it. I'll remark it, and it will improve your mark. Okay, so just all about taking time in that initiative. So again, please submit your assignments to get a chance. For those who have, thanks. I also noticed that some students are getting ahead too, which is also fine. Like I said, all you have to do is read the textbook, all the answers in the textbook, read it, answer, do the assignments, and you can just submit it. Okay, so thank you, great job so far, and just keep up the great work. All right, so let's move along. Again, any questions, just please let me know. All right, so last class we started talking about Canada's involvement in the Second World War. Okay, so from those who are listening, which is great, those who can see my smartboard screen, which is also great too. You can see that there's lots of scribbles on there, a lot of circles and underline marks. So I'm just going to go over some key points that we talked about last class. Again, this is also key information that you will see again on your assignments. So Canada's Second World War. So one of the main reasons why Canada started to be involved in the Second World War, because simply during this time period there was the Great Depression, which left many Canadians out of jobs. Many out of jobs, so there was really not much to do other than go fight in the war. During this time period, Canada was not so much linked to the British Empire. Therefore, Canada can declare going to war on their own. They didn't have to follow what Britain was doing. They can just decide on their own during this time period. So let's try to erase some of this material so that we can start fresh. And just quickly go over some key points that we talked about last class that you will see again on your assignments. Again, like I said, Canada joined the Second World War simply because they left them out of work. Okay, you also see this also fancy term called the arsenal of democracy. Okay, so the arsenal of democracy is pretty much, Canada was known for the arsenal of democracy because they produce lots of food and weapons during this time period to help war efforts overseas. So Canada back home, we were really involved during the war efforts. We were known as the arsenal of democracy because we produced foods and weapons for war efforts as well. So that's also what we talked about. Again, I'm going to erase this part right here. I'm going to quickly go over Camp X. Camp X. So for those who recall, Camp X was a training commando institution that was established in Canada. It was near Oshawa, Ontario. It was established on December 6, 1941. It was used to train secret agents, spies, and assassins to fight the Germans. Again, lots of great development came out of Camp X. So people from all over the world, not just Canada, came to Camp X to train. They learned fighting tactics such as kicking, especially how to kick, punch, jab, how to enter, escape buildings, how to use different weapons, learn secret codes, travel through nights, climbing cliffs, and such. So the Canadian RCMP was, for example, was an institution that trained at this Camp X. So this is something that was really significant that Canada developed, that happened in Canada during the Second World War. Again, it trained secret agents, spies, and assassins to fight the Germans. Okay, now a key point. Again, I'm going to erase this part right here. And we'll quickly go over some of these main points that we covered last class. Alright, so during this time period, Canada Prime Minister was Mackenzie King. Mackenzie King was our Prime Minister. So his goal during the Second World War is to ensure that Canadians have their basic needs. He wanted all Canadians to have their basic needs during this war, during this time period. So like if you recall from last class, he established three main acts or principles that help Canadians during this time period. So I'm going to put this in a box. So one of the acts, that he developed was the Unemployment Insurance Act. Unemployment Insurance Act. So what the Unemployment Insurance Act was that if you were Canadian and that you can prove that you had worked before, you can claim like unemployment pay period during this time period. So people who were out of work were allowed to collect unemployment for a period of time, provided that they had worked before they became unemployed. So before, like for example, you worked and then you got laid off, or something like that. Now you're unemployed. If you can prove that you worked before, you can claim some employment funding called the Unemployment Insurance Act. That was something that he insured. So that Canadians still have some money that they can care for their family. The second thing that Mackenzie King established was the Allowance Act, Family Allowance Act in 1944. Family Allowance Act. So basically what the Family Allowance Act was, families with children also receive allowance called the baby bonus. The baby bonus in order to cover necessities such as food, clothing, and shelter. So basically the baby bonus, which is like a great thing. So basically a family with more children, they can receive more baby bonus, more money that they can claim for food, shelter, and clothing. And finally, the last thing that Mackenzie King established, something that would also happen during World War I, was victory bonds. Victory bonds. Victory bonds were something that Canadians can purchase at a low interest rate. Afterwards, they can cash it in after the war in order to get interest. So the victory bonds were in order to raise money for the war efforts. So something that Canadians can purchase. And when the war is over, they can cash it in and get some interest rates as well. Okay, so those are some key materials that we covered last class. Again, this is important because you'll see them again on your assignments. Scrolling down, see some couple images. Again, this fancy man here is Mackenzie King. Just a couple posters, victory bonds, as you can see. Again, if you're unable to see my smartboard screen, that's okay. You can always go back, go on YouTube, because I will always be posting my lessons on YouTube as well. Again, you just Google Jeho Wasa. You'll see all my lesson posted on there. Again, you can also find me on Facebook as well. Just Google Jeho Wasa. You can add me as a friend. That way you can ask questions if you have any difficulties. Then I'll reply. I can also post remarks that way too through Facebook. And simply, once the course is done, you can simply just delete me as a friend. That simple. Alright, one final thing before we move on. We also talked about something called the consciousness objectors. So these were people who oppose fighting for the war. Mackenzie King didn't have to enforce conscription because most Canadians were willing to go to war during the Second World War. But the conscious objectors opposed going to war because of their personal, religious, ethnical beliefs, saying that they didn't want to be involved in any war, conflict, any fights. So some examples would be like Mennonites, Jehovah's Witnesses. They didn't believe going to battles and war conflict. They want to remain neutral. Something that the French Canadians, for example, they didn't want to fight in the Second World War. Okay. And then you'll see again, it'll say, go to assignment 4 in your student workbook. So let's quickly go over that. So again, assignment 4, it can be completed now. It can be all done. So just to go over the questions and some of the expectation again is what I'm looking for. So assignment 4, question 1 states, what was the main reason Canadian citizens joined the Second World War? Okay, talked about last class, and I just talked about again today. Why was Canada known as the Arsenal democracy? Again, something I just talked about today. Okay, what was Camp X? Something that Canadians and Canada was proud of during this time period that we established. So what was Camp X? Please note that these questions are all out of 2 marks at the moment. So 2 marks. Okay, so again, just because it's out of 2 marks doesn't mean I want like a 1-word answer or a 1-sentence answer. So the more details that you can provide, the better mark that I can give you. Okay, so the more detail, the better it is. On to the next page. Again, question 4. In order to ensure Canadians have the basic needs met, the Canadian government, led by Prime Minister Mackenzie King, took specific steps. Name 3. Okay, name 3 measures created to provide financials for families and describe their purpose. Okay, there's 3 things. Okay, don't just name me one. There's 3 things. Okay, so 1 mark for naming the name of the measures or the act that he created, and 1 mark for describing what that purpose was. Okay, so there's 3 measures, so a total of 6 marks. Okay. And question number 5, who were the consciousness objectors? Again, that's what I just talked about today. Okay, this is all review materials that we talked about last class, but again, I'm just going over. I know that at times we do have new students coming into the class, registering late, which is okay too. So like I said, I'm not going to go all the way back from the beginning and start again, but if you want me to go back and clarify some materials, I can. So just a quick review materials that we covered before. Again, it's also helpful again because when you write your tests, you may see some of these questions again on your test when you write your final test. So just keep that in mind too. Alright, so we're going to move on. Again, a little quick review about what we talked about last class about Japanese involvement and Japanese-Canadian in the Second World War. During the war, during this time period, what happened was that, as you recall, Japan planned a surprise attack on the United States on Pearl Harbor. So during this time period, the United States were not directly involved during the Second World War at the moment. They remained neutral, where Canada, Britain were fighting against the Italians and the Germans, but the United States were neutral at this time period until Japan planned a surprise attack on the United States on Pearl Harbor, their Navy base. Just caught the United States off guard. The reason Japan attacked the United States because Japan didn't want the United States to be involved in the Second World War. But guess what? This woke up the United States, and they declare war on Japan because they bombed Pearl Harbor. Because of this bombing, this kind of like sent like a little shockwave across like North America and Canada, for example, because they saw Japanese as a threat to their society, as our society. So we kind of mistreated them because of this. So you see on my screen, and if you're following along in your textbook, I'll let you know what page we're on. We're on page 13 at the very bottom, where it says Japanese involvement in Japanese-Canadian. So if you can't see my smartboard screen, which is okay, you can follow along in your textbook. You have that by chance. It's on page 13 of your textbook. Page 13 and page 14. Okay, so during this time period, there was lots of racism, discrimination on Japanese-Canadian, not just Japanese, but mainly everyone of different ethnicity and race. So even the Jewish population in Canada were being discriminated during this time period as well, because they were seen different and they were seen as like a little threat to Canadian society. So we mistreated them with discrimination, something that we're not quite proud of. On to the next slide. Again, you'll see that thousands of Japanese Canadians were moved away from the west coast of the British Columbia interior. They were now moved inland. The husband was separated from the family. All the properties were taken by the Canadian government. and then to fund and finance the war efforts. And once the war was over, they were still mistreated. They were not given back their properties. Okay, so for example, David Suzuki, famous Canadian environmentalist, um, he he was in Canada during this time period, and he grew up faced with a lot of discrimination. He saw how the Canadian government was treating the Japanese during this time period. Okay, so some example, like I said, they were moved from the West Coast, now into the inland interior. Husbands separated from the families. There were all the properties were taken by the government. Again, move on to my slide. You can see some more information about Japanese Canadian. All this text is also in your textbook that you can read. There is an article, "The Silence is Broken," which talks about an individual personal experience growing up during this time period, what they face and what their family face. Okay, all this information is key. Make sure you read it in your textbook as well. The article is on page 15. All right, moving along. So we're going to talk about the Holocaust again, just a little quick review. What was the Holocaust? Again, it was when Hitler and the Germans tried to eliminate all the Jews. Um, if you recall, Hitler during this time period during war saw the world in his own vision as it had to be pure German. If you weren't pure German or German ethnicity, you were not considered like ideal. So anything but German, he wanted to eliminate. So since the Jewish had different beliefs and culture and ethnicity, he wanted to eliminate all the Jewish population in Europe. So what happened was that the Holocaust took place, where Hitler murdered around 6 million Jews in Europe during this time period. So they were, murdered or placed in gas chambers. So he tried to eliminate all the Jewish population. Again, this was something that, like I said, Canadians mistreated Jews in Canada as well during this time period. And how the war ended, Canada and Britain and France sent all the troops into Europe, known as something called D-Day, where they sent troops to push the German force back. There was lots of battles that took place. All these battles eventually pushed the German troops back and back even more. Then Hitler realized that he sensed defeat was coming on, so he committed suicide. And then, he committed suicide, which marked the ending of the Second World War with the fight against Germany. But then again, like I said, the United States was still fighting a battle with Japan. United States dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And then that finally marked the end of the Second World War. Finally marked this end. Alright, again, you'll see here, assignment 5. Why did the Canadian government force attention on its Japanese citizens following the bombing of Pearl Harbor? Again, why would they mistreat them? Another question on assignment 5. Give specific details about the mistreatment Japanese Canadians endured during the Canadian government following the bombing of Pearl Harbor. 3 marks. Question number 3. What was the Holocaust? 2 marks. Next question, outline the events in 1944, 1945 that brought the end of the Second World War. 3 marks. Okay. So just a little recap. of how the Second World War started, for those that missed it and those that would like to hear it again. So after World War One, as you recall, the Treaty of Versailles was signed, and during the Treaty of Versailles, it blamed Germany for causing the war and their hostility. Um, Germany went into a deep depression. They had unemployment. Again, another reason that caused all this was the stock market crash in 1929. A man named Adolf Hitler uh, came to power. He gave voice to give hope to the Germans. He promised the people the country can be more powerful, much bigger. And as a result, the Germans voted him into power in 1930, known as the Nazi Party. So he was the leader of that party. Um, he created tons of false advertisement promoting that Jews cheated the country, and people believed him. Um, like I said, in terms of Hitler mind, Germany was the best ethnicity, and then besides, Germany was not, not okay in his mindset. So Germany teamed up with Italy and later on with Japan, known as the Axis power. Like I said, Germany shrunk after World War One based on the Treaty of Versailles because they had to give back all the land that they acquired. As a result, Germany still had this mindset of wanting to invade other countries. They still want to conquer as much land as possible. So what Germany did during this time period was that they invaded Austria, they invaded Czechoslovakia, and then the rest of Europe was like, hey, what's going on? Based on the Treaty of Versailles, you can't invade any nations or any countries. So the rest of Europe and Britain saw this as like a threat. And they warned Germany not to invade Poland, but Germany invaded Poland anyways, and as a result, in 1939, Britain declared war on Germany. So that's basically how the Second World War started. Germany also invaded Russia later on. Like I said, Japan bombed the United States on Pearl Harbor, which made the United States declare war on Japan. In 1944, as we talked about, D-Day took place, where the Allies troops, such as Canada, United States, and Britain and France, they invaded Germany and pushed them back. Many series of battles. This is when we noticed that the Nazi Party and Hitler was killing many Jews, known as the Holocaust. Then finally, Hitler committed suicide, where he shot himself, and in May 1945, May 8th, 1945, the war was over. But then, like I said, Japan, United States was still fighting a war with Japan at the moment. The United States feared that Japan would invade the United States. So what they did was that they dropped a nuclear bomb on Hiroshima. Japan didn't surrender at this moment. So the United States dropped another nuclear bomb on Nagasaki, again, which killed tens of thousands of Japanese citizens. And then Japan finally surrendered, which marked the ending of the Second World War. Okay, so that's a little story about how World War took place and how it ended. Okay, so like before, we talked about how Canada was like in the 20s and what was Canada like in the 30s. So in the 40s, which was during this time period, which is what we're learning about right now, in the 1940s, there were some good periods and there were some bad periods. Okay, so some bad periods. Remember, Canadians' attitude towards other ethnicities was not always admirable. Um, we have to accept our nation's responsibility for the treatment of Japan, Japanese-Canadian, and the Jewish population during the Second World War. Lots of racism took place, lots of discrimination took place. So it's something that Canadians, something that we should not forget about, something that we're not proud of. But again, on the bright side, during this time period, during the 40s, something that really positive that took place in terms of Canada was that not all contribution were made on the battlefield. Canadians were proud of the contribution made by Camp X, as we talked about, as part of the World War II war efforts, where we trained many um, assassins and training institution and secret agents. This is something that Canadians are really proud of. So as we're learning history, as we're studying history, as historians, it's really important that we remember to keep in mind um, the positive aspects, the positive and the negative aspects, the good and the bad sides. So when we're looking at history, there's always the good side and the bad side. So it's really important that we take a look at both sides of the equation, both sides of the events, to take note of what was really happening during during the time period during the past. I think that really marks the end of what we talked about during the Second World War. So again, assignment 4 can be completed, and assignment 5 can also be completed now. Again, those are all quick reviews of what we talked about last week. But again, I think it's important that we take some time, try to slow things down a bit, give students a chance to get caught up if they need to, and follow along as well. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a new section, a little new topic today. We're going to look about after the war, after the war, after the Second World War. So what happened after the Second World War? Again, if you can't see my screen, that's okay. This is also in your textbook, or winding down lesson 2 of history, which is almost done. So if you follow along, we're on page 16 at the bottom of page 16 of your textbook, page 16. So I'm going to start this section today. There's a little short section about what happened after the war. I'm going to start today. I don't want to finish it today because I want to give students some time, the opportunity to work on their assignments today and then ask questions if needed. But again, I'm going to finish this section off tomorrow, and then we should be on our way to a lesson 3 next week. Or I might even start lesson 3 tomorrow. See how far we get. So after the war, what happened? So like I said, World War II ended. So what happened afterwards? So Canadians were horrified to see what happened in Europe, especially to the Jews. Okay, so as you remember, the Holocaust took place in terms of the Jewish population. So Canadians were horrified to see what happened in Europe, especially to the Jews. Canadians focused their energies on creating laws that would protect human rights in Canada in order that the Holocaust would never happen again. Okay, so after the war, we wanted to create laws that protect human rights in Canada. Okay, as humans, we have rights. Okay, so we want to have rights that will be established so that something like the Holocaust would never happen again. Okay, you can't just go out and kill, have a huge genocide, huge murder of a mass population. Okay, we just can't do that. Okay, so because of this, we need to protect human rights so that something like this devastating event in terms of history such as the Holocaust will never happen again. So never happen again. So what happened was that in the late 1950s, something that was created was called the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was created. The Bill of Rights later turned into something called nowadays as the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom that was created in 1982. Okay, so the Bill of Rights and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom are like the same thing. It just started out as something called the Bill of Rights. Then as time evolved, as time changed, it evolved into something called the Charter of Rights and Freedom that was established in 1982. So what you really need to remember was that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, which I'm highlighting in red, it gave Canadians, it gave Canadians rights to vote. So now you have the right to vote, the right to election, the right to move around the country, the right to life, liberty, and feel safe. the right not to be arrested without a reason, and a right to a fair trial. Okay, people will not be discriminated anymore. Okay, we can't be discriminated based on our race, age, gender, sex, you name it. Okay, all this is outlined in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. Okay, and also recognize that Canada has two official languages, French and English. Okay, all this rights, right to vote, right to move around the country, right to life, liberty, security, right to be without be arrested without a reasonable cause or reason, the right to a fair trial, can't be discriminated. All this rights are outlined in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. Okay, all this outlined in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. Okay, so we all have these rights. We all have these rights. So yeah, so keep in mind, this is the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. This is something that is still happens today. It's really important document, very, very important, huge part of Canadian Constitution. It's really important, this document. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit more about the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. So the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, like I talked about, was entrenched in the Canadian Constitution in 1982. Okay, so what I'm talking about now is a bit of background information. You won't see this in your textbook, but it's really important that you follow along and you listen along as well. So the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom was entrenched into the Canadian Constitution in 1982. It gave Canadians legal rights to protect themselves against the government abusing their power. The creation of the Charter saw the dreams of Trudeau, who was the Prime Minister in the early 1980s, saw his dream come true as it reinforced the fundamental rights and freedoms of Canadians. However, this was not the first time that Canada had a legislative that reflected in human rights. So prior in the late 1950s and early 1960s, John Diefenbaker, who was the Canadian Prime Minister at the time, adopted, like we talked about, something called the Canadian Bill of Rights. Okay, this was created in the late 50s, early 60s by a Prime Minister named John Diefenbaker. He adopted the Canadian Bill of Rights, where he based it off the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Canadian Bill of Rights was simply just a law. It contained no provision of official languages. As a result of this, Prime Minister Trudeau felt that Constitution was needed to recognize the rights and the fact that Canada founded two official languages. So the Bill of Rights was created, but Trudeau had other visions in mind, so he started to change it. The Bill of Rights was not a part of the Constitution. It had no more power than any other laws in Canada. Okay, so the Bill of Rights during that time period was just a law. However, it was a law itself was discriminatory. The Bill of Rights was generally not helpful. As well, the Bill of Rights only applied to federal, not provincial laws. Because Canada's original constitution was the act of the British Parliament, it could not be changed it can only be changed by Britain. By entrenching the charter into the Constitution, the Canadian government will be allowed to make its own rules and change it without permission of Britain. The charter is the supreme law in Canada, which means all other laws must conform to the rights outlined in the charter. If there's a conflict in the law, the charter always takes precedence. The charter has improved the ability of Canadians to participate in society. It has given important meaning to equal rights and protection to rights. The Charter has also brought clarity to identity of Canada as a nation. So that's just a little example of how the Canadian Bill of Rights was created and how it was kind of different from the Canadian Charter. So that's why the Charter is really significant in terms of our society nowadays. So the way the Canadian government has treated minority groups prior and post Confederation has been similar. Okay, there was lots of discrimination, racism, unequal treatment. Before the charter, often little could be done about an unfair law passed by the government. Sometimes there was no protection for minority rights or fundamental freedom. The charter protects Canadian as a form of minority groups from unfair treatment. This shows and indicate violation of basic discriminatory democratic rights cannot be prevented without constitutional guarantees, hence why the charter was necessary. With the charter in play, the Canadian citizens have a clear recognition of human rights and freedom. The ways to enforce these rights, the charter gives citizens a tool to see that the government and law must respect the rights and freedom. The concept of the rule of law applies to the charter because everyone, even the government, must obey and follow the charter. No one is above the charter, since it is entrenched in the Constitution. The charter holds common value as a nation and strong element of security for the nation. The charter also brought clarity to the identity of Canada as a nation. If there's a question about the rights and freedoms of Canada, the charter gives a framework to arrive at an answer. Okay, so the charter is really important because no one is above the charter, so even all the Canadian citizens and even the government must obey the charter. Okay, this is why, in my opinion, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, it's really it's an important document in terms of Canadian history. So again, for those who can see my smartboard screen, I have a little link at the bottom of the slide. Okay, so if you click on this link, it should open up, and you'll see the Canadian Constitution Act. In other words, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. So if you scroll through this whole document, it basically outlines all your fundamental and legal rights as a Canadian citizens. So for example, Section 1, it states, everyone is entitled to these rights. Then you got your fundamental freedom rights. So freedom to religion, freedom to opinion expression, freedom of a peaceful assembly. Then you have your democratic rights. So you scroll through this whole document. So mobility rights, as we talked about, every citizen of Canada has the right to enter, remain, and leave Canada. Again, it talks about your legal rights, if you get in trouble with the law, how you're not able, how everyone has the right to be secure against unreasonable search and seizures. Okay, everyone has the right not to be arbitrarily detained and imprisoned. So these are all rights that we have as Canadian citizens. That's why I think knowing what the charter is about, it's really important in terms of Canadian history. Okay, equality rights, Section 15, again, something important. It talks about no discrimination. So everyone's equal and before and under the law. We have equal rights to protect ourselves without discrimination. Again, without race, nationality, or ethnicity, color, religion, sex, age, mental, physical disability. Okay, there's no more discrimination. No more discrimination. Okay, it's all outlined in the Canadian in the charter. Okay, official language. We have English or French. Those are recognized in the charter as well. And in terms of First Nations and Indigenous content, something that I really want to note is that if you scroll through the charter and on to the next page, section 35. Section 35. This is really important. I think this is the first time that this took place in history, that under the charter, under section 35, subsection 1, the assistance, Aboriginal and treaty rights of Aboriginal people are hereby recognized and affirmed. Okay, in this act, Aboriginal people of Canada include Indian, Inuit, and Métis people of Canada. Okay, so the charter, this piece of legislative government recognize First Nation Aboriginals rights and as an individual. Okay, this is the first time I think in all acts that, like I said, Aboriginal people of Canada are now recognized. We're all recognized. So this is really important. This is really important. This is really important. Okay, so that's just a little more background information about the charter. Okay, like I said, the charter was created in 1982 by Prime Minister Trudeau. What you really need to remember and take out of it was that now Canadians have the right to vote, right to election, right to move around the country, the right to life, liberties, and feel safe, the right not to be arrested without reasonable cause, the right to a fair trial. Okay, no more discrimination against others, and we now have French and English as the two official languages. Okay, then you'll see this again. So, I believe there's a question on your next assignment about the charter, so just keep that in mind as well. So I'm gonna kind of pause and stop it here for today. So for all those working on your assignments, I'm gonna give the class a bit of time right now to go through any assignments you have, work on it. If you have any questions, I'm here now. You can ask questions. Okay, and then tomorrow we're gonna finish off this section. Okay, so again, I'm gonna be on air for a few minutes before I take off. But again, I'm gonna give the class a bit of time right now to go through your assignments, go through the lessons, go through the textbook, review materials, see what makes sense. If you have any questions, again, I'm here to answer any questions that may have. For those that wants to move ahead, crash assignment 6, you can start that today. Okay, assignment 6 is really short, not too long. So something that we covered today is question number 1. So why did Canada feel it was necessary to create the Bill of Rights and the Charter of Rights and Freedom? Why did Canada feel it was necessary to create the Bill of Rights and the Rights and Charter of Rights and Freedom? Outline what these laws were designed to enforce. Okay, so kind of like a two-part question. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. Make sure you answer both parts. So why did Canada feel it's necessary to create the Bill of Rights and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, and outline these laws were designed to enforce? Okay, I believe that's the only question that can be answered at the moment, assignment 6, unless you want to continue and move forward. All the material is in your textbook. Again, for example, make sure, again, just a reminder to all students in class that please write in full, complete sentences. Write clearly and neatly. So, for example, you can start off with this question. Could be like, Canada felt it was necessary Bill of Rights and Charter because, and then you can state your answer. Okay, full complete sentences, and they could be like, the Charter or these laws enforce da 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 laws. Okay. Again, all my lessons will be posted on my YouTube channel. You can just Google Jeho Wasa, and you can always go back, review materials, see what you have missed. Okay, again, you can also find me on Facebook. You can Google, search me at Jeho Wasa again. And I can answer any questions as well. Just a quick reminder as well. We do have a class tomorrow. Okay, class tomorrow. at 9 a.m. Central Time. We're going to have a live class a little makeup class that we missed on Tuesday. Okay, so I'm going to make that up tomorrow morning. So again, please, if you're able to, I highly encourage you to go to your learning center, get your classmates to get involved as well. Come to the learning center, listen in, follow along, participate, because we do have a class tomorrow. Okay, moving.